Dim the lights, take a breath, and picture this. You step into the Forum of Rome at noon, the sun flaring off white marble and bronze. Voices ricochet across the square, auctioneers on platforms, buyers clustering in to get a closer look, and lines of people chained, tagged, and silent standing on low blocks, so every tooth, every scar, every muscle fiber can be priced. If modern hiring feels stressful, imagine your resume hanging from your neck. Rome didn't just use slavery, it engineered it. The empire ran on grain and people, and today we're going straight to the shelf where people were priced. What did a human being cost in Rome? Why did the numbers swing from a soldier's yearly pay to the price of a country villa? And what did those numbers actually mean in Roman money? First, the cash. Romans did day-to-day math in sesterces HS. A silver denarius was worth for sesterces. Over time, coin purity and pay scales changed, but use this anchor during the early empire. A rank-and-file legionary's annual base pay is often cited around 900 sesterces. That's 225 dinar. It's a reference point, not a fixed law of physics. Pay rose later. Deductions bit hard, bonuses existed, but it lets you feel the stakes. Now plug people into that math. At the rough end of the market, the basic model, male and unskilled prices, commonly sat in the hundreds to a few thousand sesterces, depending on age, health, origin, and demand. Think of approximately 1,500 to 2,000 sesterces as a very plausible ballpark many historians use for an unskilled, able-bodied man in a stable supply year. That's roughly 2 years of base soldier pay. So yes, buying one person could equal marching 2 years, getting paid in dust and danger. Why the spread? Because Rome priced humans like the world's grimmest spreadsheet. 5 variables mattered everywhere. Age, teen to mid-30s, was prime, old enough to work hard, young enough to last. A child might be cheaper today and more moldable, but the owner is gambling on survival and years of training. An older person might be discounted unless they carried rare skills. Health, strong back, clear eyes, undamaged limbs. Up goes the number. A chronic cough, limp, or poor dentition pushed it down. Brutal, but true. Inspection included gums and teeth, exactly like livestock. Appearance, Rome had a pretty premium. Harmonious features, smooth skin, and youth pushed the price up, especially for domestic, serving, or display roles. Attractive could add a multiplier that has nothing to do with work and everything to do with status theater. Skills, the biggest lever. If someone could read, keep accounts, copy documents cleanly, teach Greek, mix concrete properly, tune a lyre, or perform medicine, their price could jump from thousands into 5-figure set. A literate Greek tutor, a trained physician, that's elite property to Roman eyes. Origin and stereotype. Ugly but real. Romans attached reputations to peoples. Greeks read as clever, good for tutoring and culture. Gauls and Germans, often as brawny workers or guards. Stereotypes shaped starting bids before a buyer learned the person's name. Now plug those variables into the place where it all happened. Public auctions made the spectacle profitable. People stood on platforms with a tag titulus listing basics, age, origin, skills, known illnesses, and legally required disclosures. Rome did not protect the enslaved. It protected transactions. If a seller hid a material defect, say, a tendency to run or a seizure disorder, the buyer could sue. So auctioneers made sure the label said enough to cover the seller, not to help the person on the platform. Prices rose with the crowd's pulse. A strong builder with a scarred shoulder might start modest and climb fast if two estate owners both needed quarry labor this month. A quick-fingered scribe with clean handwriting and decent Greek could leap in price because a single scribe could copy contracts, tally grain, and run messages for decades. In a world without printers, legibility is literally money. And then there's the luxury aisle. Educated Greeks, doctors, accountants, musicians, and librarian secretaries could fetch tens of thousands of sestasisk numbers that buy farms, workshops, or apartment blocks. Some recorded sales soar even higher. Were those rare? Yes. Were they real? Also yes. And the reason is chillingly logical. Elite Romans paid for people who made them look and feel elite. A host who could say, "My pedagogue quotes Plato and balances the books," is performing status as loudly as a red soup. In a tiny street, across the square, another calculation runs in parallel. Rental. Don't want to buy. Lease a worker for a day. Need 2 strong men to offload marble slabs. You can hire enslaved labor temporarily from a contractor who owns a human fleet. Rome commodified work across every time horizon: hour, day, lifetime. If you've ever called a moving service, the business model you touched has an ancient, darker cousin. But prices weren't stable. War blew up the chart. After big campaigns, the market flooded with captives and prices crashed. Middle-income Romans could suddenly stock a household. Plantation owners, flatifundia, lords bought hundreds for fields and mines, where life expectancy disintegrated. Cheap supply didn't mean cheap costs. Traumatized, battle-trained people are likelier to resist, escape, or revolt. Spartacus wasn't a spreadsheet error. He was the bill coming due. Rome also taxed the horror. A 5% sales tax on slave purchases, part of the empire's genius for monetizing its own cruelty, helped fund the state. Paperwork, absolutely. Bills of sale, wax tablets, and records stacked up in archives and storerooms. Archaeologists find these traces because Rome wrote everything down when money changed hands. So where does that leave what a person cost? With an answer you can feel, a basic laborer could equal tilde 2 years of a soldier's baseline pay, more or less. Training turned a human life into a long horizon investment, bumping prices from low thousands into the 5 figures. Beauty, youth, and household display inflated numbers in ways that say more about the buyer's ego than the worker's output. War made bodies cheaper and life shorter. The state took its cut, the courts guarded warranty law, and the paperwork hummed on. The loudest part of the forum is not the auctioneer, it's the math. Rome turned human potential into price points, returns, and taxes, and then taught the world to call that efficiency. We are still reading the receipts. Next, we follow the money beyond the platform to workshops, kitchens, farms, and counting rooms to see how training, literacy, and craft could transform a basic purchase into an irreplaceable cog in Rome's economic machine. If part 1 was the sticker price, part 2 is the business plan. Because once a buyer walked away from the forum, the real calculation began. What will make this person more profitable in a year than today? Romans didn't need spreadsheets to think in ROI, they felt it. The empire's great trick was not only to buy humans, it was to teach them. Just enough. Start in a bakery before dawn. Heat throbs from a clay oven. A new purchaser, so-called unskilled young man, hauls grain sacks while the head baker watches. Within a month, the kid knows how to sweep the stones clean of husks. rotate loaves without scorching them, and spot a bad rise the second it happens. He can count without pebbles and remembers regular customers by face. That's already a value jump. A year later, he can weigh ingredients by hand, keep a tally, and send a clear note to a tavern about late delivery. Training turned unskilled into reliable, and reliable is money. Rome's economy rewards processed knowledge and literacy. Teach the same young man to read lists and write legibly, and his price doesn't creep, it climbs. Now he can copy orders, record accounts, and take instructions you don't want to shout. Of course, training is time, time is money, and money wants guarantees. That's where control entered the business plan. In kitchens and workshops, people slept in attached rooms. In villas, they lived in service quarters close to the work. In city apartments, they stayed within earshot. Rome reduced friction and flight risk by integrating living space with work and by keeping the literate and valuable under the closest eye. You don't leave the bookkeeper unsupervised with the keys to the strongbox or the gate. Training also intersected with a chillingly clever institution. This was a stash tools, money. Sometimes even a side business managed by the enslaved person but legally owned by the master. It sounds generous until you see the logic. A peculium incentivized skill and discipline. If you got better, your peculium grew. If your peculium grew, you could buy small freedoms, nicer clothing, a better sleeping space, a few hours leeway, or even one day. Your own freedom at a price close to your market value. Owners benefited twice, from your productivity now and from the final payout when you manumitted. It's the cruelest sort of profit sharing. Inside that structure, you see countless micro-stories. A Greek pedagogue trains a bright teenage girl. In reading and numbers, she becomes the estate's inventory brain, cutting theft by half. Her resale value would be high, but the owner won't sell. She saves him more than a sale would fetch. A metalworker in an alleyway shop drills 2 boys on bronze rivets and hinge pins. Within months, they can prep a door set faster than he can, freeing him to take custom jobs. He starts renting their time to a neighboring builder at a healthy rate. A physician's assistant learns to grind and dose medicines. She's not free to leave, but her word carries weight in the household. Illness now goes through her, and people listen. Influence without freedom is still influence, and the owner knows her price is rising. Then comes reputation. Wine cellars, builders, bakers, everyone in Rome lived on word of mouth. A household with trustworthy, trained staff becomes a destination for clients and guests. That kind of soft power, you should see how they run things on the street of the armorers, spills into politics and marriage alliances. Training, then, wasn't just about cash. It was about status maintenance. A sloppy villa embarrasses the host, a sharp villa flatters him before he opens his mouth. But training isn't a fairy tale. There's a dark mirror. Selective investment, owners trained where it paid fastest and withheld where it empowered flight. Not everyone was taught to read. Some were kept useful but blind on purpose. Punishment as policy. Rome mixed carrots with sticks. A kitchen mistake might mean extra shifts. An escape attempt meant branded foreheads or collars. The balance of incentive and terror kept productivity high and risk low. Replacement, math, mines, galleys, and plantations often skipped deep training. When work was lethal, owners chose quantity over longevity. Buy cheap, work hard, replace fast the economics of despair. Even in kinder households, training didn't erase danger. A literate accountant could be sold to cover a debt. A baker with 20 recipes could be moved to an estate in a far province. Family talk existed in some households, but the ledger ruled. Back to the forum, 1 year later. Our bakery worker's owner shows a friend the books. Fewer spoiled loaves, more repeat customers. The best tavern on the corner wants a standing order. Would he sell the young man now? No, he says. He's worth more to me than the market would offer. That is the sentence that turns a person into a long-term profit center. Training has done its work, yet there's another ending. A scribe with perfect handwriting has built a decent peculium, copying contracts at night. The owner agrees to manumit free her on Saturnalia 3 years from now if she keeps. The ledger's flawless and trains a replacement. She is buying her own exit by making herself redundant. It is a genius trap and, sometimes, a door. Rome's training machine magnified value and bound people tighter in the same breath. Skill opened rooms, but never the front door, unless the math said so. In that calculus, you can read the empire's soul. It prized excellence, but only on a leash. Next, we follow the money into Rome's luxury aisle, where beauty, youth, and performance warped prices far beyond productivity. Cosmetics, euphemisms, and the status flex that made human lives into living decor. Dim the lights a little more, and step to the quiet end of the market, the part that isn't quiet at all, just softer in tone. No chains clanking, fewer shouts about stone hauling or quarry work. Here the auctioneer's voice drops into honey. Here the words, graceful, cultured, well-formed, slide across the crowd like olive oil. This is the luxury aisle of human trafficking, where beauty and polish sell as hard as masofen for more. Let's say it plainly. Rome placed a pretty premium on people. Youthful faces, smooth skin, symmetrical features, a calm gaze. These were not just aesthetic qualities, they were price multipliers. For elite households, a beautiful servant was theatre. Every dinner party starts before the first cup is poured, and the host wants guests to walk in and silently gasp. Ah, so this is how they live. Beauty did the opening monologue without speaking a word. The stagecraft began before the platform. Dealers Monganese were infamous for what you add. A day before sale, the hair is trimmed and dressed in fashionable curls. Grey is dyed away. Skin is scrubbed smooth with pumice and oiled until it glows. Mouth rinses, yes. Ancient ammonia solutions brighten teeth. Coal sharpens the eyes. A well-cut tunic or a tasteful sash lengthens the silhouette. Lighting matters. Sun behind, shade in front, so the face reads clean and the jawline looks strong. If Instagram had an ancestor, it was a Roman slave lot. At noon, on the platform, a titulus that hanging labeled does the legal dance. The aediles regulations, Rome's market watchdogs, force sellers to declare certain defects and vices. Morbus, commissalis, epilepsy, a habit of running away. Fugitivus, theft, or violent behavior. But the titulus also becomes a velvet screen for euphemism. Phrases like forma bona, good form, benusta, charming, pudica, modest, or Dr. Salar, skilled at playing the lyre, appear with a knowing tilt. Buyers hear what they want to hear. A woman labeled Formosa, beautiful, and Ari Soltar, able to sing and dance, is not being shopped to the mines. Let's follow one sale. A wealthy senator's steward, elbows forward. His master is hosting a sequence of dinner's political theatre, with roast peacock and rhetoric in equal measure. He needs a cupbearer who pours without spilling a drop, and looks like a sculptor designed the pose. The auctioneer brings out a young woman, mid-teens to early 20s, by the crowd's guessing, eye luminous skin. Steady posture, hair twisted and looped in a Greek style. The titulus reads, Greca domestica, forma bona, doctor sala, modus loquitur Greek-born. Good form, skilled at the lyre, speaks moderately. Not a word about other services, because the law likes tidy paper. The bidding says the quiet part loud. Numbers snap upward past what a sturdy field hand would bring in a month of hot arguments. The gavel hits at a price that could buy a small olive grove. Is this about productivity? Sometimes, many beautiful servants were also talented. Cup service, table choreography, harp accompaniment, memorize poetry for toasts, even language, coaching behind the scenes so the master doesn't misquote a Greek line in front of the wrong guest. Visual grace pairs with social lubrication. A host can float a tricky alliance on a river of small perfections. The right wine, the right song, the right smile at the right moment. When money meets politics, presentation is output, but often the premium was about display and domination. A beautiful attendant orbiting an elite household did double work. She reinforced the master's wealth to outsiders and reinforced the hierarchy inside. Servants watch servants. Everyone understands how the household ranks people. Lectrix, recitatrix, a reader and reciter for guests too important to squint at a scroll. Voice, diction, breath, control performance as soft power. Beauty also became a currency of closeness, where household boundaries blurred. Baths, private gardens, proximity sells for more. The paperwork remains euphemistic. The practice often does not. We don't tidy this up. Many beautiful women and men were purchased for purposes the titulus refused to print. Rome called it household management. We should call it what it was. A whadders. Did men fetch a pretty premium too? Absolutely. A handsome boy or young man with even features, strong jaw, steady eyes, could sell high for domestic service. Door duty, a human welcome mat with posture, or as a personal attendant. The gendered danger differed, but the logic didn't. Beauty attaches value. Value attaches control. Where beauty met talent, prices could rocket. Imagine a Greek singer whose pitch doesn't drift, whose phrasing holds a room, who can accompany herself on the cithara and modulate for chatter versus rapt silence. Now add poise that calms a table after an ill-timed joke by a tipsy guest. Add language's basic Latin for the kitchen, higher Greek for the library. The head of household thinks, she makes my life easier. She makes my house look finer. She makes my guests more compliant. Numbers climb. The chain tightens. You can see the business case. A beautiful, well-mannered attendant reduces social friction. She gets guests seated quickly. She knows who takes watered wine and who pretends not to. She notices when Senator X stiffens at the mention of a lawsuit and lightly inserts a song to break the stare. Call it hospitality operations. Rome was ruthless, but it wasn't sloppy. Elite houses ran like theaters with tight queues, and yet beauty could be dangerous for buyer and bought. For buyers, jealousy within the household, awkward rumors in the neighborhood, a spouse's fury, a rival's whisper campaign. For the person purchased, visibility is risk. The more you are seen, the more you can be judged, envied, targeted. A single perceived slight lifted eyebrow at the wrong guest can redraw your fate. What about manumission freedom from beauty? It happened. A favored attendant, after years of dutiful service and quiet competence, might be freed in a will. or at a festival as a grand gesture. Sometimes that gesture had strings, continued service as a client, a small dowry tied to loyalty, an understanding never spoken in ink. Sometimes it was genuine, gratitude, affection, or moral awakening. But the math lurked. Freeing a high-value person usually happened when her replacement was trained in the peak. Yield had passed late 20s into 30s for some domestic roles, when beauty's market premium waned and skills premium remained but could be replicated, even in freedom. The pretty premium left a shadow. Freed women who had served as attendants, musicians, or readers often turned those same talents into a living running small salons, teaching music, arranging hair, reading letters for fees. Beauty that once chained could, in rare lives, become capital. That doesn't redeem the system. It just proves that human beings keep finding ways to alchemize survival into skill. Let's zoom back to the market and listen closely to the auction chant. The numbers you hear: 30,000, 60,000, 100,000 sesterces. For the brightest stars do more than buy a body, they buy a story. A host wants to walk guests past a fountain, gesture to the musicians, and let the room murmur, of course he has taste, of course he has means. In Rome, status is a full-body contact sport, and beautiful servants are part of the uniform, but the same chant, heard from the platform, sounds different. A life priced not for strength alone, but for visibility, for how well one can disappear into good lighting and perfect timing while being seen by everyone. That is the most Roman paradox of all: to be valuable because you look unforgettable, and to survive by never leaving a trace. Next, we leave the salon for the sand. Beauty sold out the dinner party. Violence sells out the arena. In part 4, we crack the ledger on Gladiators, the training schools that turned men and sometimes women into walking investments. The fees, the fame, and the ugly math of a Tuesday spleen wound destroying a millionaire's retirement plan. Before the trumpets, before the crowd's roar rolls like thunder around stone, there's a quieter sound you rarely imagine: the click of an abacus. Because behind every glittering helmet and oiled shoulder, the gladiatorial world was a business, brutal, theatrical, and meticulously costed. If Rome priced people in the forum, it capitalized them in the arena. The players behind the players start with the owner-trainer, the lanista. He buys, contracts, trains, feeds, doctors, houses, and markets his stable of fighters inside a lewd-ass training school. He is part coach, part quartermaster, part talent agent, part jailer. A good lanista knows 3 languages: Latin, Greek, and profit. Where do fighters come from? Enslaved captives or condemned criminals? Damnoti ad gladium, the cheapest intake. On paper, the riskiest in temperament, sometimes the fiercest in the ring. Houseborn, enslaved men raised for the school's rare, but it happens, a long horizon bet. Octorati free men who sign a contract to fight, desperate for money, glory, or a way back from debt. They basically pawn their freedom for a purse and a chance. The lanista loves their paperwork: clear terms, clear penalties, clear resale value if they become stars. Acquisition and sticker shock: what did an individual cost? The spread is enormous. A raw, untrained man sentenced to fight could be obtained relatively cheap, but once a recruit shows promise, the numbers spiral. Months of food, housing, gear, and instruction harden into sunk cost. A known crowd pleaser: fast hands, good chin, fearless eyes can be valued in the tens of thousands of sesterces. Rarer still, a headliner with a name chanted on the street can climb higher. In other words, the forum sets a base. The ludus mints the premium. Training as manufacture the doctors, coaches, are specialists. One shapes Murmelo's heavy shields, Gladius crested helmets. Another drills retieri net and trident, fast footwork, left shoulder bare. A third builds secutors chasers with smooth helmets to face the netmen. You don't learn to swing in a ludus, you learn distance, angles, timing, and how to burn oxygen like a miser burns oil. You also learn a second craft, showmanship. Raise the blade for salutes at the perfect beat. Pause 3 heartbeats before the lunge. Make the crowd see the kill before it happens. Medical salves, splints, bandages, and the men to apply them. Coaching payroll doctors don't work for applause. Replacements every broken man is a gap to fill in the next program. A Lannister makes money the same way a shipping magnate does, keep the fleet moving, docked as little as possible, out-earning fees in safe enough seas. And like ships, fighters have lifespans. A brilliant 3-year run can make a career. A bad twist of the ankle can end one. Portfolio strategy. Don't bet it all on one sword. No one sane builds a school on a single champion. Bodies fail. Crowds turn. A stable needs balance to steady Murmelos, who can always deliver a 3-round fight. A pair of flashy retieri crowd favorites for speed and danger. One secutor designed to be their stylistic foil. A hoplomata's spear and drown shield for classic matchups. A flexible fighter who can be rematched across styles and still shine. A developing youth or two who show timing and nerve you. Throw them on early in the card to warm the seats. Add one novelty, not a freak show, but a surprise. On rare occasions, that meant a gladiatrix, a female fighter, announced with a wink and gasp premium. Novelty is expensive, risky, and headlining. The point isn't just to win, it's to fill benches and sell stories. Matchmaking, theatre, math. You pair equals and let skill decide. Or do you play with styles, net versus chaser, heavy shield versus nimble dart to guarantee tension? The referee Summa Rudis keeps eyes on rules, but the Lannister and editor choreographed the card like savvy promoters. Open with speed, build with grit, peak with a rivalry, close with a legend's appearance. If a star has a cut above the eye, that might reopen. You stack him earlier, give the crowd his face, spare the death clause, mercy, money, and the thunder myth says thumbs up for mercy, thumbs down for death. Reality is muddier, but the editor often holds the call after canvassing the crowd. Mercy missio makes fiscal sense. Why kill a man who can sell out to more festivals? But death has its own market. Value blood is an advertisement. The business brain hovers behind every gesture. Keep him if he's a mint. Let him go if the reputation bump is greater than the lost fees, or if the death clause compensation is sweet enough to fund 3 hungry rookies. Octorati, free men who bet on themselves. Their contracts are crisp, a signing bonus, scheduled appearances, penalties for desertion, and clauses about branding. Yes, literal marks sometimes, or at least paperwork marks. Why do it? Debt, hunger, bravado, a shot at Rudy's, and a purse large enough to start over. The Lannister likes them because they arrive voluntarily. Less breakage in the training yard, more buy-in to the show. Exit strategy. The wooden sword. A victorious fighter can receive the Rudy's a wooden sword, symbolizing freedom from an editor eager to stamp the day with magnanimity. The new Rudiarius isn't obliged to fight again. but many do, for higher pay or for the roar that wakes them more than porridge ever did. Some pivot to coaching doctor now, not fighter, and the cycle continues, skill compounding across generations like interest. A nimble child can plate 3 courses while dodging elbows and ash. Fire leaves marks, so does confidence. Weaving track, color names, tension, pattern, memory. The child dabs at fringe, learns aediles, counts without counting because the fingers know. A good loom team is a chorus one small voice joins until it knows the song. Courier track, feet, memorize streets. The child learns to pass through crowds sideways, to read faces for danger, to keep messages sealed and thoughts closed. A trustworthy runner is the household's artery. Library clerk, track the prized path. If a child shows nimble memory, or the precious itch to draw letters in dust, someone might place a wax tablet in those small hands. First, copy single letters. Then, the alphabet in both directions. Then, names. After that, lists. A day will come when the steward hands over a real message. Take this to the wine merchant and wait for his reply. When the child returns, with the answer intact and the wax smooth, something permanent changes, value spikes. Now add a darker track that winds through to many rooms. The ornament track, where beauty, glowing skin, bright eyes, even a delicate lisp becomes a job. Description. A child becomes a delicium, a darling, a living toy for a bored teenager of the household or a grown master who confuses possession with affection. Paperwork stays clean, practice does not. Rome will call this intimacy. We should call it danger, not. All dangers come with silk. Mines and fields swallow children too, especially on estates where the overseer believes that small hands are good for small spaces. A child can slip into a crevice to scrape, or child can duck under vines to pick grapes others miss. Work size to the body is not mercy when the body is still growing. Growth plates ache, spines remember. Yet even in harsh places, attachment leaks in. An older worker teaches the boy how to sling a basket so it won't cut into collarbones. Weaver hums a regional song that belonged to her mother and now belongs to the room. A cook sneaks a burnt end of honey cake to the girl who kept the fire right all afternoon. These kindnesses don't cancel a system. They explain how human beings survive one. What about houseborn, specifically the Verni? Their economics look different from purchased children. There was no auction day, no first price. There is a steady drip of cost and care that builds toward usefulness. Owners like them for this reason, Verni fit. They know who is allowed to shout and who must never be startled. They sleep lightly for the master's cough and not at all for the steward's. They can run errands without being stopped by the doorkeeper because the doorkeeper recognizes their steps. They are less likely to run because they have nowhere to run to. The world beyond the gate is an ocean they cannot swim. Some houses cultivate Verni deliberately, pairing healthy women with steady work and modest rest, protecting pregnancies. Enough to keep the nursery stocked. Others do it incidentally. Life happens, children arrive, the staff adjusts. On the great estates, numbers turn cold. Births per year, survivals per year, new workers in 6. On paper, cost curves bend, sweetly upward. In the fields, funerals lean hard to the other side. What's the exit for a child who grows obedient and useful? There are a few: manumission, freedom, sometimes in a will, sometimes as a public gesture at a festivalus, especially for houseborn, who became indispensable. or for those who nursed a mistress through fever, or who saved a toddler from drowning in a courtyard pool, or who simply worked quietly for 20 years without failing. Freedom often comes with strings: continued service as a client, a room in an outbuilding, a little money, and a lot of gratitude expected forever. Placement sale or transfer into another house, not always a punishment. A literate Werner might be placed with a patron's son starting a household. A skilled weaver might be gifted with a dowry chest to a cousin. Paper moves, people follow. Peculium path, the rarest and hardest for a houseborn child, grows skill. Be allowed a peculium managed stash, buy freedom years later at a price close to your peak market value. It is like paying the ransom history demanded of you. Pricing evolves as the child does. At 7, a small sum. At 12, with a memory for patterns and a strong back, more. At 15, literate and discreet. Now you are staff, not a child, and the number a dealer whispers in a private sale could buy a row of decent tools or a mule team. That number pins you down. The higher it climbs, the less likely you are to be allowed to leave the walls unaccompanied. Value thickens the air like honey sweet to smell, impossible to wade through. There is one more ledger in a room no accountant enters, the emotional one. Children raise households as much as households raise children. A gruff cook softens. A weaver laughs like a bell when a little hand tangles the warp and then untangles it again. A steward who prides himself on order sneaks an extra olive to a boy who ran a message in the rain. The master's wife, who has buried 2 of her own infants, holds a feverish girl through the night and sings in a language she hasn't used since she herself was small. The next day, the steward writes a number in a column, because that is his job. But the song remains under his breath as he tallies oil jars. That is the crack where light gets in. What do all these details mean for the price of children? They mean that price is not a fixed sticker, but a trajectory, a line that can curve upward sharply with skill and favor, or break abruptly with illness, accident, or anger. They mean that the market's cheap today hides years of hidden costs, 2 bodies, 2 souls, to the quiet people who keep both alive after the day's work is done. And they mean this. Rome built not only an economy of slavery, but a demography. Of it, houseborn staff are not just inventory. They are supply chain. The system reproduces itself by making captivity feel like home. It doesn't always succeed. Rebellions happen, escapes happen, manumissions happen, but for centuries. It succeeded enough to keep the wheels turning and the books balanced. Listen again to the small aisle in the market. The hush sounds like compassion, but it's calculation wearing softer shoes. A child blinked at noon becomes a kitchen hand at dusk. A kitchen hand becomes a steward's shadow. A steward's shadow copies the accounts. A neat hand becomes a neat life, until one day, maybe, a wooden tablet appears that says Liberta or Libertas, and the door opens half a hand's width. The pipeline runs either waif from cradle to collar, and sometimes, rarely, from collar to key dot. Picture a field after the shouting stops. The dust settles into a dull haze, and the javelins in the ground look like broken reeds around a pond of silence. Then the noise returns, different this time. Overseers barking counts, quartermasters tallying spoils, ropes, chains, and lines. Rome's legions do not simply win, they harvest. And when a campaign goes Rome's way, the slave markets, from Sicily to Delos to the Forum, change overnight, as if a storm front rolled through and reset the barometer. Prices don't just wiggle, they collapse. Welcome to clearance. Season. War. Captivity is the engine that periodically floods supply. After big victories, trains of prisoners, sometimes tens of thousands, move like a shadow army behind the standards. This is logistics with a pulse. The column stretches for miles. Wounded Romans on mules, wagons of loot, herds of seized cattle, and then people, wrists tied, neck cords looped in series so one stumble pulls 5 others down. The same troops who moments ago were disciplined killers become guards and drivers. A masterclass in statecraft follows. Convert conquest into cash as quickly as possible. From battlefield to block, the first market isn't marble, it's mud. Commanders hold field auctions to lighten the convoy and turn mouths to money. Middlemen dealers with the battlefield equivalent of wholesaler badges by people in bulk. They don't care about individual stories yet. 100 Gauls for transport to Naprabo, 200 Cappadocians for the Anatolian coast, 1 lot of chain gang laborers, good for mines in Spain. Some fight for a better look, show the teeth, but mostly they move fast, because time is expense and distance is risk. Every mile is a potential escape, every delay a fever. From the field, the stream splits into routes, overland to regional hubs, where provincial governors and tax contractors, the publicani have warehouses and contacts, river down to ports, with good anchorage, Massalia, or C2 slave islands and market towns, especially Delos, which boasts the grim brag that it can handle thousands of bodies in a day, clear manifest, clear profit at each stage. The value add is minimal: food, shackles, basic care to keep the load alive. The dealer's goal is velocity. Move stock to markets with more buyers and reputation for cash. Rome proper is the jewel crowds, elites, and buyers with specific needs, but provincial centers with mines, quarries, and latifundia. Vast estates pay very well for bulk and ask few questions. Why prices fall hard? When supply spikes, price curves do what price curves do. That sturdy quarry hand who might fetch 1,800 sesterces in a normal year now goes for 900, maybe 700 if the seller is up against a sailing schedule. The buyer smirks. I'll take 4. Plantation owners pounce. Middle-class households that previously rented a porter for feast days now consider buying one outright. When victories stack Macedon 1 year, Pontus the next, Gaul after, that the market hardly catches its breath before the next wave hits. Add timing, festivals, triumphs, and post-campaign returns create synchronized bursts of inventory. A victorious commander's triumph in Rome pours prisoners into the city right when crowds are most celebratory and cash is sloshing. That should push prices up. Instead, the sheer volume pushes them down until elite buyers skim off good. Lots educated, pretty, skilled, stabilizing a small segment at the top and letting the base price collapse for the rest. Cheap is expensive. Here's the trap. Bargain labor often turns into the costliest labor you'll ever buy. Trauma and defiance fresh captives have nothing to lose. They organize, resist, sabotage, and run. You put them in chains at night and keep long knives out of reach through the day. Productivity plunges under watchful eyes and heavy locks. Stolen. Moments cost you tools, time, and sometimes lives. Training burden you didn't just buy for strong backs. You bought 4 languages, 3 religious calendars, 2 diets, and a dozen ways to interpret a hand signal. The first 6 months look like spilled grain, miscommunication everywhere. Eventually you teach, scold, punish, and integrate, but the ramp is slow, and your cheap purchase burns salary in overseer hours. Security overhead. More bodies require more control. Extra guard shifts, sturdier doors, iron collars, and chain links, dogs, bribes to neighbors to keep quiet, and goodwill with the local vigils, watchmen, so incidents get handled discreetly. These are not one-time costs, they're subscriptions. Revolt, risk bulk purchases, concentrate danger. Put 100 battle-tested men under one roof with tools and minimal food, and you are writing a play with a predictable third act. Plantation. Owners in southern Italy learned this too late. The names on the bills of sale became the names on the rebel rolls. Spartacus was not just a hero of defiance. He was a line item that metastasized. Reputation drag if your estate becomes known. For brutality, skilled renters stop coming. Neighbors stop selling you decent grain, and city clients prefer other suppliers. Reputation is grease in ancient economies. Lose it, and you buy sand. The middlemans, math dealers, thrive by arbitraging place and patience. They buy in the field at rock bottom, tolerate the risk and the rot of transport, then break lots into micro-markets. City households get the healthiest and the pretty. Workshops get the trainable. Mines get the desperate mixes of strong and spent. Public projects, roads, aqueducts, quarries, get whatever the procurator signs for at each fork. Price per head changes by context, not compassion. A literate Cappadocian boy who looked like nothing in a dusty corral now looks like a secretary in a townhouse atrium because he is. The dealer did not create value. He discovered it in the right light. The states cut the republic and empire, are not shy, spoils feed, stipends, public works, and political careers. Slaves are listed on triumph plaques, numbers, not names, and sales are often taxdrome, loves a percentage. Victory pays for victory. The machine loops itself, a cynical loop, but an effective one. War finances the capacity for more war. Waves. And whiplash, the market doesn't fall once, it oscillates. After a glut, prices creep up as absorption happens. Mines devour, latifundia settle, households train and retain. Then, another campaign, prices fall again. This whiplash ripples. Urban labor, free citizens who used to hire out 4-day work, find their wages undercut. Resentment rises. Some drift to the army, others to breadlines and clientele networks. Smallholders, competing with latifundia, worked by enslaved labor. They sell out and swell the city's population, accelerating the politics of grain doles and street power. Politics. Reformers think Gracken energy point to inequality born of conquest economies. Conservatives shrug and say the system works. Look at the roads and theaters. The plantation, illusion that India, managers love a low purchase price. They imagine a perfect curve. Buy cheap, work hard, replaced fast. For certain operations, the mines, especially this ugly math, works for a few seasons. But hidden cracks widen. Soil exhaustion from monocrops. Without experienced husbandry, yields drop. Tool breakage skyrockets when terror replaces training. No one pauses to sharpen properly. Animal losses mount when inexperienced hands feed and harness badly. Supervision, burnout, brutal overseers are not cheap to replace. Competent ones quit, or worse, flip when they read the room. The plantation's quarterly numbers gleam. And then the fourth quarter arrives with a field gone silent and an overseer's body discovered near the olive press. Clearance season profits become multi-year losses measured in empty barns and court cases. The clearance. Aesthetic. The markets themselves change tone during flood years. The forum smells different. Crowded, anxious. Auctioneers speed up. The tituli hanging labels grow thinner. There's no time to list all the defects. Euphemism sharpens. Spirited covers half a dozen battlefield habits. Field ready covers scars you can't see beneath the tunic. The aediles try to enforce disclosures, but the game is volume returns. Good luck. The seller is boarding a ship to Rhodes at dawn. Meanwhile, in Delos, the choreography is industrial. Barges dock, men disembark in files, lots are chalked on forearms. Buyers cluster by habit. Mines to the left, villas to the right, Rome's agents with their seals everywhere. For a week, the island hums like a hive, then empties and sleeps until the next convoy, the consolation prize. Not everything in a flood is cruelty and collapse. A fraction of lives bend toward survivable shapes they wouldn't have found otherwise. A captured Iberian boy with a knack for numbers becomes a clerk who never digs another furrow. A Galatian girl with musical pitch becomes a reader who spends her 30s in a library, not a field. A manumitted Thracian smith, freed at 40 after a career in a city shop, buys a stall of his own and hires 2 boys free because he cannot stand the jingle of a chain. These are the anomalies empires showcase to forgive themselves. They are real. They are not the rule. The price of peace here's a paradox. The best cure for clearance seasons is peace, which Rome often refuses because peace doesn't yield triumphs. In quieter decades, supply thins, training matters again, and the price of a person rises toward something like sustainability on Rome's terms, not ours. Households focus inward. Estates invest in soil and staff, and the mines grumble about labor shortages nobody mourns. Then a general with hungry eyes draws a border on a map that wasn't a border yesterday, and the cycle starts again. Julius, the flipper. You've heard the stories. A certain ambitious proconsul sells captives in the thousands so fast he breaks the market for a season. Whether the numbers are exact doesn't matter. The effect is, prices spike down, villas fill up, and politics tilt as gold from sales fattens war chests. Clearance seasons don't just rewire households, they rewire elections. Your bargain, there forever stand at the edge of a flood year auction, and listen to the buyer's bargain. A denarius shaved here, 50 sesterces saved there. It feels like cleverness, but the savings you pocket are debts someone else pays for a lifetime with bruises, with scars, with songs sung softly to themselves, in a language nobody around them understands. Rome could have built its grandeur slower. It chose speed. Speed meant war. War meant clearance, seasons. And clearance seasons meant that the empire's most intimate rooms, the kitchen, the nursery, the weaving loft, the garden path filled with people whose first sight of Rome was a price. Before the chains, there's chalk. Before the whip, there's wax. In Rome, even cruelty kept books. If the forum was a stage and the slave block its spotlight, the real show ran in the winged scrapes of stylus on tablets. Names pressed into wax, seals pinched shut with a ring that meant you can sue me if I lied. The empire that engineered aqueducts also engineered receipts. Walk with me behind the auctioneer's voice, past the crowd and the clatter, into the little world of preco-crier, scribe clerks, coctors, taxmen, and the aediles market magistrates who turned Rome's fondness for rules into a warranty policy for human beings. It's obscene. It's also meticulous. The tag around a neck on the platform hangs a placard, the titulus a Roman version of a product page that leaves feelings out and defects in. It lists origin, Phrygian, Sicilian, age, skills weaves, reads, plays the Cythera, and, by law, certain vices that must be revealed. This last bit isn't charity, it's regulation. The curule aediles ran the public markets and issued an edict that forced sellers of slaves and livestock to disclose latent defects, not just diseases and injuries, but moral landmines like fugitivus, habitual runaway, thief, gambler, drunkard, even has tried to harm himself. If you hid these, you weren't just a scoundrel, were liable. Penelope.uchicicago.edu. Retail history. Why did the aediles care? Because they wanted a market that churned. Quick sales require trust, so they hardwired trust with two remedies any buyer could use without proving the seller's bad faith. Actio redhibitoria, unwind the deal entirely, return the person, get the price back. These weren't timeless rights. They were fast and fading. 6 months to rescind, 1 year to demand a reduction. Missed the window and you moved from the Edo's speedy lane into the slower, fussier courts, where you'd have to prove intent or bargain for damages another way. The point was simple. Keep markets moving by letting buyers fix egregious surprises quickly. pure.uva.nl scholarship.law Columbia edu cpb-us-w2.wp mucdn.com Paper promises. Wax reality. Here's the choreography of a sale most people never see. The preco shouts the lot. The crowd bids. The hammer drops. A coactor steps in for the state's cut. Rome skimmed 1% on auction sales centesima, rerum veneliuma. Hum of revenue that flowed for years into military pensions and other funds. On a huge day at the block, that tiny percent becomes a quiet river of cash. Penelope.uchicicago.edu, Wikipedia, AUS, taxpolicy.com. A tabelio scribe scratches the essentials on wax or papyrus. Seller, buyer price, disclosed defects, and often a stipulation spoken, then written promise that the seller stands behind the disclosures. Witnesses sign. Rings press seals. Duplicate copies travel different routes like insurance. Public sales were theatre with a paper trail. Private sales were velvet with a thicker paper trail and often higher prices. Off-market buying meant you paid for discretion, pre-sale, and sometimes a custom warranty. If the boy has epilepsy, I will take him back within 30 days. Or, if she runs within 90 days, I pay half back. The aediles didn't rule every private room, but their norms seeped in, even behind curtains. People spoke the language of defects and returns the markets had taught them. When as-is meets Roman law could, a dealer dodged liability with a wink and a clause. Venditus, ut est ubi est, sold as is, where is. Sometimes, Rome loved freedom of contract. But when the sale ran under the aediles' eyes, auctions, markets, the edict's baseline warranties stuck. You could add terms. You couldn't erase the duty to disclose the enumerated stuff, disease, dangerous habits, runaways. If you hid a listed vice, the buyer didn't have to prove you knew ignorance wasn't a defense. The clock 6 months, 1 year was your only friend. pure.uva.nl, penelope.uchicicago.edu. And those clocks were sharp. The redhibitory action rescission had to be brought within 6 months. The quanti minoris price cut within a year. That urgency kept merchants from tying up inventory in years of litigation and kept buyers from treating the market like a lending library. Rome chose speed over perfection because commerce prefers clean endings. Oxford Academica return desk with Sandalzim. Imagine a buyer spots the problem 2 weeks in. The new purchase collapses in a seizure. The titular said nothing about it. He walks to the aediles tribunal, tablet in hand, and files for redhibition. The magistrate can order the person returned to the seller and the price refunded. Maybe there's a debate about incidental costs. Food, transport, physician. Maybe a neutral is appointed to value the defect. If the buyer would have bought at a lower price had he known, he can choose quanti minoris instead. I'll keep him, but pay me back the difference between the price and his true market value with this defect. These weren't abstract debates. They were weekly noise in a commercial city. A clever buyer might press both actions strategically. A clever seller might offer a quiet settlement to keep his name off the rumor mill. A dealer's reputation was currency. Lose it, and even the prettiest stock sat too long in the summer sun. Taxes on the way in, taxes on the way out. Rome never missed a skim. On the way in, auctions paid that 1% centesima, a modest bite multiplied by scale. On the way out, freedom the state bit harder. Manumission, the turning of a slave into a freed person, carried a 5% tax, the vicesima libertatis, 1/20th. Free your barber in your will. Someone pays the 5% of the notional value. Let your most trusted steward buy himself out with his peculium. The same 22-1 toll applies. Rulers tinkered with rates across centuries, but the baseline is crystal. Rome monetized both possession and release. Penelope.uchICAGO.edu Wikipedia. It sounds clinical. So say it, human. Freedom had a cash register sound. Morbus vitium, the fine print that cut deep the eidos edictand. The jurists who glossed it into forms sorted defects into morbus disease and vitium fault. A limping gait, a chronic cough, fits of melancholy so deep the person couldn't rise from a bed, a habit of theft or flight. Sellers of human beings argued over Latin nouns to shave liability. Buyers poked gums and calves and demanded open necks so the titulus could be read from 3 paces. The law's cold neatness didn't clean the market's heat. It just contained it. Hercaquan disputes burned hotter fraud, violence, stolen persons laundered through dealers' hands by could leave the aediles' streamlined lane and sprint to the praetor for heavier artillery actions requiring proof of dolus. Bad faith. Those suits were slower, more expensive, and less predictable. Most merchants calculated and settled where they stood. The offstage costs all. This paperwork had gravity beyond a single sale. Because rescission was fast, dealers learned to disclose. More than less, at least the stuff the edict listed so returns didn't boomerang profits 6 months later. Because price reduction claims will live for a year, buyers became sharper. A bad cough in winter might be a claim in spring. Because the 1% auction tax skimmed every lot. Big traders angled for private packages and direct placements where they could, sometimes, dodge the Spirandhammer rituals and negotiate their own terms, though the state's eyes were long and its memory longer. Penelope.uchICAGO.edu. Even the manumission tax-shaped choices. A sentimental master freeing 3 loyal house-born attendants at Saturnalia might look generous in publicant till his accountant whispers the total for the vicesima. Suddenly, the ceremony becomes a will clause instead, shifting the timing and sometimes the tax burden. The state's percentage haunted the tenderest acts. Penelope.uchicicago.edu, public under the spear. Private behind a curtainal here, at phrase at auctions, sub hasta under the spear. The spear was the symbol of state sale, a carryover from selling war booty. It signaled that the aediles were watching, the centesima would be collected. The titulus must be honest, the remedies were hot. Under the spear, the rules ruled. Behind curtains, temples, townhouses, gardens, relationships ruled. Patrons placed. Trained attendants with clients. Cousins moved skilled weavers in dowry bundles. A senator's steward traded a literate boy to a rising politician, starting his household. The price was higher, the paper thicker, the reputational bonds stickier. If a defect surfaced, the aediles might never hear of it. A messenger, a purse, a private apology, and the city's rumor mill never turns. Yet even there, the public law cast a long shadow. The language of redhibition and quanti minoris seeped into private agreements. The way modern contracts borrow, as is limited warranty or fitness for purpose. Rome's marketplace invented a grammar of returns. Its households adopted the accent. The clerk's little Mersey spin, an hour by the clerk's board, and you'll spot one fragile kindness. A name gets written. Not just one Cappadocian boy, but Menandros, son of no one we know. A line. Item gains a syllable. Later, if there's a lawsuit, the same name appears again. A paper loop becomes an identity loop. Some freed people would cling to those letters, later carving M.L. Marcus's freedman or L.L. Lucius's freedwoman into a stone to root themselves in a city that once wrote them down to calculate a tax. That is Rome's paradox. A system that turned people into property also turned property into records and records for a tiny fraction, into the beginnings of a paper self. What the receipts reveal, you can look at all this and say, Rome built consumer protection. Or you can look and say, Rome protected transactions. Both are true. The aediles' edict wasn't a hand of mercy. It was a handrail for commerce. The centesima hummed because the spear's shadow guaranteed swift remedies. The rang because freedom was valuable enough to tax. The receipts don't make the market humane. They make it efficient. They also make it legible. 2,000 years later, historians find these bits of law and scrapings of wax and read stories the auctioneer never intended. A refund for a seizure that struck on a winter night. A price reduction for a habit of flight. A tax collected on the day someone left a collar behind. Paper chains don't bruise the skin. They outlast it. If Part 7 showed us Rome's paper chains, Part 8 takes a jeweler's loop to the numbers stamped on those wax tablets. Why did one person's price hover near a rank-and file? Soldiers' annual pay, while another's could buy a tidy farm and a view of the road. Rome didn't price people by gut alone. It built a ruthless algorithm long before algorithms had code. Age, health, origin, skills, temperament, and looks. Ad market, weather war, famine, festival land. The total flickers like sunlight on water. Let's walk the variables one by one, not as abstractions, but as rooms in a Roman house where prices were lived. 1 age. The cruel curved children were cheap on day one and expensive over time. Their sticker price could sit far below an adult's in ordinary years because you're buying risk and delay. You feed for years before the first return, trained from scratch, and gamble against fevers and falls. Some owners buy adolescents to dodge the dead seasons. Others, especially big villas, think in pipelines and raise Verney houseborn, Trading. Cash cost for calendar cost. Prime years teens to mid-30s stoked bidding wars. Endurance, speed, and a decade of work ahead. Up goes the hand, up goes the price. If the prime body came paired with prime habits, early rising, steady focus, the auctioneer barely needed to pitch. And the curve didn't crash at 35. A 40-year specialist cook, scribe, foreman could outrun younger competitors on value. Because skill compresses time. Older workers slid in price unless they carried rare knowledge. A grey-haired Greek reader with nerves of steel during legal recitals could cost more than a strong youth with nothing to teach. Rome learned, as we do, that replacing a steady hand is pricier than buying a strong back. Micromath you could hear. On the block, 12 years old, sturdy, quick hands. No skills yet gives low entry price, high carrying cost. 22, prime build. No training gives mid-price with training upside. 32, literate, reliable, trained in accounts, gives the multiplier is baked in. 48, one eye, perfect palate for sauces, knows half the city's fishmongers by name, gives pay the cook. To health, the hidden discount and the dramatic premium Rome. Inspected bodies the way a miller inspects grain. Teeth, gums, breath, the quickness of a calf muscle when prodded. A strong chest, clear eyes, unscarred shins, this read as low downtime. The reverse chronic cough, limp. Eye disease dragged price down unless skill counterbalanced it. But health could also inflate price. A proven constitution in a risky job, construction foreman who's never missed a season. Courier with iron. Shin sewed like a warranty. Owners paid for uptime the way we pay for battery life, under the aediles rules in public sales. Diseases and certain vices had to be disclosed on the titulus. So health wasn't just a body, it was a line. In a legal script, morbus? No. The absence of that single word could add pure, cold value. 3. Origin and stereotype. Shortcuts that cost lives. Romans bought stories about peoples and then made prices from them. Greeks, the brand name for letters, music, teaching, and taste. A Greek accent in the library could double a number before the first sentence was read. Syrians, Egyptians, prized in some markets for accounting, scribing, shopcraft, and temple-adjacent finesse. Gauls, Germans, coded brawn, good for hauling, guarding, and, in the arena, for certain fighting styles. Thracians, a reputation. In the schools of the sand and sides, in the imagination, Hispani, often cast as tough field hands or miners. A hard stereotype that sometimes turned to gold when one of them showed a gift for metalwork. These shortcuts, distorted reality. Countless lives were mispriced on a rumor of ancestry, and yet the market used them as if they were spreadsheets. The clever buyer paid for the person, not the story, turning stereotypes into bargains. Dealers did the opposite. They wrapped stories around bodies like ribbons and sold the bow dot for skills, the multiplier that made cheap, expensive and costly. Cheap skill was Rome's favorite form of compound interest. 3 examples show how one talent rewrote the ledger. A. The cook with perfect garum in a crowded city. A cook who could judge fish sauce by scent stood between you and public shame. Invite a praetor, serve burned mullet, and your next petition dies. Price the cook high, sleep easy. She knows oven moods, market days, and which olive oil not to buy because the pressman watered it down after his son got sick. That web of quiet. Knowledge is cash flow in an apron. Be the concrete whisperer. Rome's superpower was Pozzolanic, concrete a recipe. not a miracle. A worker who feels the moment the mix hits the perfect velvet, who hears a sloppy batch by the scrape of a shovel, prevents collapses, delays, and lawsuits. His unskilled cousin costs less up front and more when the arch cracks. See the ledger hand, literate, neat, and discreet. A scribe who can copy contracts clearly, total columns without pebbles, and carry a message he doesn't repeat. This is the household's nervous system. He frees the master to be political and the mistress to be social. A second set of eyes on numbers reduces theft and waste. His price rises every month. He prevents an error. Training multiplies price because it multiplies time. A trained person compresses 3 people's jobs into one steady day. Rome was ruthless, but it wasn't dumb. It paid more for the worker, who saved it from itself. 5. Temperament. The premium you can't see at a glance. Does she panic? Does he brood? Will he run? The titulus had to disclose certain vices, fugitive, thief. But everything else lived in the auctioneer's patter and the buyer's instincts. Calm under pressure, sold well in kitchens, courts, and shops. In the arena, cold eyes could add a digit. In the nursery, gentleness with a feverish baby did more than any price could measure, though the market tried. Owners learned that steady temperament reduces broken jars, broken contracts, and broken nights. The discount for a quick temper only looked attractive until the third smashed amphora, or the second argument with a gateguard. 6. The pretty premium, visibility, as value and risk. We saw in part 3, how beauty became a status engine. Here, we measure it in coin. Harmonious features, clear skin, symmetrical limbs, good posture, and the trick of wearing light like a garment. These sold at a multiple in domestic roles. Cupbearer, reader, musician, door attendant. Add grace under scrutiny and you get an even steeper line. The premium wasn't about output, it was about aura. Beauty told guests a house had taste and money. Rome paid to be believed, but the pretty premium came with risk. Visibility invites jealousy inside and gossip outside. Owners paid high and then paid again in watchfulness, in locks, in chore assignments that kept valuable assets close to the eye. When beauty plus skill converged, a singer who never misses pitch, a reader whose voice holds a room, an ornate whose hands turn hair into architecture, prices soared into the 5-figure cestices in lucky markets. That number did not mark happiness. It marked a tether, 7 market weather, war years, feast days, famine, shadows even, perfect variables, can't outrun weather. In flood years, part 6, prices sagged across the base laborers halved. Mid-skills discounted while the top end held steady or dipped less. At big festivals and triumphs, discretionary domestic purchases rose. Musicians, readers, cupbearers as hosts staged their reputations. In famine shadows, kitchen staff with food procurement savvy jumped in price. Someone who could stretch oil and outfox a greedy miller was a force multiplier. 8 bundles, warranties, and the art of stacking. Dealers didn't just price individuals, they priced ensembles. A cook plus an assistant who knows her temper and preps exactly the way she likes. A scribe plus a runner who keeps him on schedule. A mason plus a lime mixing partner trained to his rhythm. Bundles let buyers purchase reliability, which Rome valued more than brilliance. Warranties, explicit promises about health or flight, shaved or added cestices, depending on how much risk was pushed back on the seller. A promised return window 30 days on a suspected illness could float a deal across the line at a higher price. because fear was priced out. Point 9. The price you can't tally. Maintenance. The sticker is never the whole cost. Maintenance eats empires, housing, safer rooms close to the work for high-value roles, guards when needed, food, better rations for heavy labor or high-skilled performers to keep them at peak, tools and clothes, shoes for couriers, sharp knives for cooks, styluses, and tablets for scribes, medical stitches, poultices, time off. Downtime you can prevent is money saved. Owners who saved on maintenance paid in breakage, sick days, ruined dishes, lost packages, and resentments that fermented into revolt or departure. In every century, the cheapest way to run a system is well. 10. The pricing toolkit, the forum in your ear. You could stand on the paving stones and hear the variables click. Prime age, no vices, Golgodarm, 1,800, Greek reader. Steady hand, knows house accounts. Poor night vision, 12,000, quanti minoris, if it worsens. Beautiful cupbearer, trained, plays lyre, modest, high 5 figures. Owner won't budge. 2-man bundle, mason plus lime hand package savings, if bought together. Field season glut, prices down 30%. Mine's buying. What you won't hear is the sentence under every sentence. Value is a story told by power. Who tells the story dealer? Buyer crowd shapes the number, and the number shapes a life. 1 house, 4 lives. A composite modest senator's townhouse. Upgrades in a single year. He pays mid for a courier who can read street faces like a map. The boy's roots have lost time and bruised shins. He pays high for a cook whose sauces keep guests another hour and talking. Debates slide his way with every swallow. He pays a premium for a reader with perfect diction. She saves him from mangling Greek in front of a rival. He pays a quiet price for a laundress with hands like rain. His togas last a season longer. His staff costs more than his neighbors. His outcomes cost less. The last digits stand at an auction and watch the final jump, when the number pauses at 24,000 and then, with a breath, becomes 26. That is not pure math, it's desire. A variable we haven't named yet. The buyer's He thinks the cook will make him cultured. The reader will make him learned. The cupbearer will make him enviable. He is buying a version of himself the city will applaud. Rome learned to tax, that Ben did. But beneath the desire and the digits lies the oldest. Constant, skill and steadiness outlast fashion. Beauty fades, stereotypes fail, market weather turns. The cook still tastes the sauce. The scribe still balances. The book, the courier still arrives, dry in a sudden rain. When the glamour drains out of a decade, those are the people an owner keeps sand the ones most likely, someday, to see a door open a hand's width dot at first glance. The women's side of a Roman household looks like a quiet miracle of logistics linen that smells like wind. Bread that rises at dawn as if it were scheduled. Infants who sleep because someone sang them steady. Look harder and you see the moving parts. The laundress with raw wrists. The cook who knows every oven's mood. The wet nurse whose milk is a clock. The weaver who keeps patterns in her fingers like prayer. Women's labor ran Rome's private world, and Rome priced it with a mixture of awe, hypocrisy, and appetite, kitchen, hearth, and the price of competence. In a city where a single dinner could tilt a lawsuit or a Senate vote, the Coquok cook was not background noise. She could make or unmake a reputation with a sauce. Her value rose with 3 qualities. Timing ducks arrive warm, not weary. Sourcing the fishmonger who lies is never used twice, and discretion, what the guest said over the third cup, stays. In the steam, a cook who read the room could be worth more than 2 quarrymen. She saved the household from embarrassment, and saved face is currency. Under her, a ladder, pistrix baker, conditrix sauce maker, focaria half attendant, and runners who learned to move hot platters through crowded rooms without flinching. Prices rose with reliability. Burn 1 peacock and you get a scolding. Burn 2 and your titulus shrinks your worth. But if you can pull an overbaked loaf back from the edge with extra oil and a sly brush of honey, a buyer hears that story at the block and pays a premium for judgment, weaving rooms and the mathematics of cloth. In the textrina, the loom sang. Women counted with their hands warp tension, shuttle rhythm, weft density. Beautiful cloth wasn't luxury fluff. It was inventory and public messaging. A household that dressed its people well declared itself orderly and solvent. A skilled textrix could run a team, dye threads consistently, stretch wool without thinning it, and fix snarls mid-weave. Apprentices fetched water, sorted skeins, learned color names that weren't on any palette, only on tongues. This isn't red. It's the red that says, we meant it. A weaving team bought as a bundle fetched more than the sum of its parts. Harmony priced higher than raw hands. Laundry and the chemistry of humiliation. The fuller handled the dirty end of dignity. Urine, ammonia brightened whites. Clay and stomping did the rest. The job chewed fingers and lungs. Yet a great laundress could rescue a stained toga better than a mediocre dyer could hide the damage. The price curve respected outcomes, not glamour. In a city of courts and clients, crisp cloth is a handshake. Women who delivered crispness got paid well by market standards, never injustice. Wet nurses and the economics of breath. Nutresses received a grim premium. They kept babies alive. Milk, warmth, instinct, night vigil. The trick of shifting a child from left to right without waking it, none of this appears on a titulus in words, but everyone in the market knows it's there. For elite houses, a named wet nurse could be a lineage saver. In the record books, she's sometimes a footnote. In the household, she is gravity. Prices reflected that, and so did relationships. Some nutresses were freed in wills. Others weren't, because the house couldn't bear to let go of the one person who could fix a fever at 3 a.m. Teachers, readers, hairdressers, soft power as hard value. Electrics who could read Latin and Greek in a voice that held a room. A pedagoga who shaped a child's manners and mind. An ornatrix who built hair into architecture for dinner. These roles fused skill and social risk. A reader mispronouncing a philosopher courts ridicule. An ornatrix with a shaky hand can turn status into comedy. Buyers paid for poise. The premium rose further when the woman could pivot. Hairdresser by noon, wardrobe fixer by 4, reader by candlelight. Flexibility earns in any century. The danger nobody writes on the sign. Euphemism, detox. Beauty and youth drove up prices, and with them, risk. Paperwork rarely said concubine, but the market spoke fluent implication. Labels like former, bona good form, venusta charming, pudica. Modest packaged a person for rooms where consent did not exist in the modern sense. Domestic proximity bedchamber service, bathing attendants. Coubering was profitable because it was intimate. It was brutal because it was intimate. Owners liked to call it household management. We should call it what it was. Control of bodies. Some households tried to keep pretty women safe by making them visible in pairs. Never alone, always under the dominor's eye. Others did the opposite and hid them in plain sight, doubling tasks to keep them exhausted. Neither solved the structural fact. The law largely backed owners and price-tracked pleasing, not safety. The most expensive women were sometimes the least free to walk a courtyard unscorted. Pregnancy, children, and the ledger that pretends to be love. A woman's womb was a line of supply under Rome's law of status through the mother. If she was enslaved, her child was enslaved. Some houses encouraged births with better rations and lighter duties late in pregnancy. Some simply didn't beat a woman when she started to show. A few created small nurseries staffed by older women who could keep infants breathing through winter. In a ledger, New Verney looked like capital appreciation. In life, they are crying at 2 a.m., while a woman who never consented to any of this hums them back to sleep. Discretion as strategy, silence as skill. Women were the keepers of secrets. A laundress knows which tunics smell like fear before a trial. A cook knows which guest can't hold wine. A nurse knows whose son wakes crying on nights when thunder is far away. Silence is not free, it is a discipline. Households paid more for it even if they didn't say so. Freedwomen often built livelihoods on that discipline later, running small salons, reading letters for neighbors, hairdressing for fees, selling recipes or remedies. Information, once kept safe, can turn into capital. Manumission, strings attached. Pathways to freedom existed through peculium savings, through a will, through public gestures at Saturnalia, but they were narrow and often contingent. A beloved nurse might be freed and given a room in the outbuilding and a small allowance in condition. She stays nearby to help with future infants. An Asian cook might receive liberty but continue on as a paid client. Paper freedom didn't always move the bed. Still, some women built empires out of inches. A shop with a partner. A network of customers who once dined in the halls where she cooked. A daughter she can now claim. Resistance, quiet and otherwise. Safety in numbers, allies among men and women. The art of misunderstanding, a dangerous instruction. The trick of being busy when a certain door opens. The gossip that protects. He's watched, don't go alone. Not every house crushed. Every voice. In some, women carved small republics, watching each other's backs, allocating better food to the sick, trading favors across rooms. None of this makes the market benign. It explains how people lived inside it, put a price on all that Rome tried. The market could price a sauce, a weave, a bath's perfect heat. It could even price silence. It could not price the way women held whole houses together by knowing who needs a blanket, who needs a harder look, when to speak, when not to, how to keep a child from coughing to death, how to keep a master from humiliating himself in front of a senator. That knowledge made households hum. It rarely made tituli honest. The mathematics of women's labor ends in a human remainder. A city that bragged about law and engineering built its private comfort on women whose work was essential, whose danger was normalized, and whose value rose when they became more controlled. That's not a bug in Rome. That's the blueprint. Next, we pivot to a different kind of control. Castration sold as trust. Part 10 asks how a mutilated body became a luxury good, and why some buyers paid extra for a kind of safety that was never as simple as it looked. Imagine the pitch. He's calm, gentle, sings clearly, manages accounts, and is safe among the women. The word eunuch doesn't appear on the titulus du blunt, but the inference hangs in the air like incense. In certain Roman contexts, and especially in Eastern-influenced courts and temples, castrated men commanded a disturbing premium. Rome, which loved to advertise its practicality, sometimes paid extra for a feeling you can't weigh, security where the premium comes from. Castration usually performed on boys before puberty changes bodies and voices. The result, in the cultural imagination, a person coded as non-threatening to women, hard to tempt with family interests, and supposedly safer with secrets. That's the sales pitch. Add a singing voice that stays high and clear. Add a smooth face that reads youthful for years. Add the perception, often false, that the eunuch's ambitions are limited, and buyers tell themselves they've purchased. Trust is expensive. The price won't show up only at the block. It appears in architecture, the rooms you let someone clean, the letters you let someone carry, the keys you place in a palm without looking up. Eunuchs entered those spaces, roles that mixed music with management. In households and temples, eunuchs often served as singers, readers, or attendants in rooms where women lived and bathed. In some courts and great estates, especially later and farther east, they handled chambers, wardrobes, even treasuries. A man who won't start a dynastic branch was seen as a safer steward of another man's dynasty. Put crudely, if you believe he cannot compete for your women, you believe he will not compete for your legacy. The logic is warped. The purchase, powerfully rationalized, a particularly prized profile, a eunuch who can sing and count. Music soothes tempers in public rooms. Numbers tighten bolts in private ones. Add literacy and the ability to anticipate a mistress's needs without hovering, and you arrive at the cruel apex. A person paid high because violence once paid a surgeon. The pipeline of harm. Rome imported many eunuchs from regions where the practice was more institutionalized. Others existed closer to home in later centuries as court fashions shifted. However sourced, the supply chain begins in mutilation. A boy is held down and made into a product. Whether he survives the procedure depends on luck, skill, and the gods the adults around him believe in that day. That boy's survival becomes someone else's margin. We cannot clean that up with antique phrasing. How the market priced safety. Start with the baseline for a literate male domestic worker who can sing already a high ticket. Now add fit for the women's quarters, entrusted with jewels. Up goes the number. In some markets, the premium soars because rarity combines with role. There simply aren't many people who tick all the boxes: voice, manners, literacy, stamina.com. Sellers whisper of temple blessings or court recommendations, fold letters. In and watch bids climb. Buyers don't only buy a person, they buy a policy. A man you allow to pass unchallenged through rooms where your wife, daughters, and concubines live is a walking guarantee against scandals, so the story goes. In practice, households blunted risk with layers, attendants in pairs, older women supervising younger ones, doors that never shut fully unless family is inside. The eunuch performs security in the eyes of visitors and, sometimes in the eyes of the owner. Performance is what Rome priced. Accounting myths and realities. A favorite myth says, without lust, he won't take bribes. His ledger will be clean. Anyone who has ever met human beings knows this is nonsense. Temptation wears many costumes: money, comfort, petty power, revenge. Eunuchs could be as loyal or as dangerous as any other person allowed near cash and secrets. But because a buyer paid a premium and told himself a story, he often saw loyalty where he wanted to. Confirmation bias is not a modern invention. It is a human one. Still, the role produced genuine excellence. Given education, position, and time, some eunuchs became superb administrators, calm under pressure, fluent in logistics, gifted at reading rooms and numbers. The premium separated not merely bodies but talent from anonymity, albeit by a path so unethical it stains every success that followed. Status, intimacy, and a different kind of danger. Eunuchs lived among the powerful, close enough to hear what even cousins didn't. That proximity made them both valuable and profoundly vulnerable. They were easy to scapegoat, neither man in Roman macho politics, nor woman by law. If a rumor stank, a courtier could pin it on the person everyone already whispered about. When blame needed a home, it often moved toward the quietest figure in the room. The same silence that made a eunuch useful could make him combustible. Yet proximity also created odd alliances. A mistress confides in an attendant who has no sons to spill secrets to. An owner leans on the one person who outlasts tutors and nurses and stewards because he has nowhere else to go. The dynamics could be warm, manipulative, reciprocal, cruel often. All at once, households told themselves they were safer. They were different. That is not the same. Freedom with and without doors. Manumission happened. A favored eunuch, after years of service, might be freed and endowed with a stipend, a small house, perhaps a shop to run. Paper liberty does not undo the irreversible. It can, however, produce agency. Some freed eunuchs became shrewd businessmen, money lending, textiles, especially where their long apprenticeship in logistics paid off. Others stayed in place as clients, functionally doing the same work without the collar. A few became patrons themselves, sponsoring younger dependents, not children, and building networks that outlived their first household. The morality of margins. If you feel the tug of war here, admiration for excellence, contempt for the story that created it, that's correct. Rome's eunuch premium exposes the core lie of the market, that safety can be engineered by damaging someone else. The market called this prudence. Ethics calls it violence with a receipt. So why dwell on it? Because it shows how a society will pay almost anything for the feeling of control inside its most intimate rooms. Eunuchs were a luxury item in that sense, a status purchase masquerading as sober policy. The price tells us not only what Rome wanted, tells us what it was afraid of. Long before a horn sounds, the ground already knows. Elephants await first, then sound a vibration that tells cavalry horses to remember they are small. When Carthaginian generals led columns of armored elephants toward the line, they weren't merely moving animals. They were moving money and message. Spectacle is never free. Acquisition, the first bill. Carthage drew elephants from North Africa, primarily smaller on average than Indian cousins, but far from small. Sometimes traders supplied others via eastern routes. However sourced, each animal represented a chain of costs: capture, taming, mahout driver training, fodder water, a beast doctor able to do something when tuscaps chafed, or a foot rotted. Add armor, head plates, chest protection, tusk blades. Add the howdah, a wooden tower for archers or spearmen. Add the team, 2 to 4 soldiers on the back, handlers on the ground, escorts to keep infantry from being crushed by a sideways mood. The sticker shocks a treasurer before the animal ever meets a trumpet. Training, turning mass into method. Elephants aren't siege engines you can park. They are living timing. Mahouts taught start-stop on command, formation, discipline, tolerance, for drums, horns, screams, and smoke. Some animals took to battle practice. Some never lost the wild shiver and became liabilities. In peacetime, you train and feed. In war, you gamble. Will the animal go forward when noise and bright metal and the smell of blood hit? Carthage paid to make yes more likely. It never reached 100%. Psychology, the prepayment of fear. The first time a Roman line met elephants, the animals paid for themselves in panic. Horses bolted at scent. Men stared at this mix of armor and flesh and forgot the step that makes a shield wall a wall. The value of an elephant wasn't only the bodies it crushed, it was the order it cracked. Disordered Romans were discounted Romans. Carthage invested in that markdown. Logistics, a diet that drains coffers. Travel with an elephant and you travel. With fodder, tons of it, over a campaign, plus water that must be found even where maps show none. Roads that fit wagons don't always fit giants. Bridges built for oxen complain under 6 tons. Every day without a fight is a day of cost. Every day of cost teaches a quartermaster to hate spectacle a little more. The Alpine image and the cost that never leaves. Hannibal's crossing of the Alps with elephants is the poster every schoolchild knows. The cost ledger is less famous. Narrow paths hacked wider. Animals lost to slips and cold. Weeks of extra forage hauled where forage didn't grow. The survivors paid their way at Trebiox on the flanks. Cavalry turned to soup, but the winter did what Romans couldn't. It killed most of the herd. The bill keeps arriving when the parade has gone home. Match up math when Rome learns your trick. Spectacle dies when it becomes predictable. Rome adapted. Legions opened lanes in formations, so charging elephants passed down corridors into rear. Zones where javelins and slings waited. Trumpets blared to spook animals back into their own lines. Light troops targeted eyes and trunks not easily armored. Caltrops bruised soft feet. Pits broke legs. The lesson spread. If you can't out-spectacle the spectacle, reframe it. Make it a logistics problem with tusks. At Zama, Scipio didn't meet elephants head-on, he channeled them. Some charged through Roman lanes and were herded away. Others panicked and crushed Carthaginian cavalry. Carthage had expensed fear. Rome amortized it. Risk management, animal version. Carthaginian commanders knew the downside. A wounded elephant can forget sides. Some armies carried hamstrings or spikes to kill their own animals if they turned. That is a terrifying line item. Emergency. Destruction of sunk costs. It underscores the central truth. The more expensive your weapon, the more dramatic your bankruptcy when it misbehaves. Why do it at all? Because politics. An elephant is a press release with feet. It says, we command nature. We are rich. We are inevitable. In front of allies, it reassures. In front of enemies, it dazzles. In front of citizens, it makes taxes feel like participation in grandeur. Carthage didn't only field elephants to win battles. It fielded them to frame Carthage. That framing worked until a Roman named Scipio reframed faster. Romans borrow and domesticate. Rome did use elephants on occasion, captured beasts in displays, and some campaigns, but note the pattern. Rome moved elephants from battlefield to parade to arena. When a weapon turns unreliable, Rome files it under spectacle and keeps the brand Triumphal processions loved elephants because they doubled the victor's scale. The cost now bought narrative, not risk on sand. The spectator economy, bread, circuses, and the price of ore. Back in the city, elephants became part of a portfolio of amazements. Gladiators, beast hunts, staged sea battles. The state discovered what every showrunner knows each season must top the last. The budget curve for spectacle rises until it breaks necks. Exotic animals require fleets and bribes and handlers. Arenas require repairs. Your editor's political rival adds a second day to keep up. The public still roars, but accountants start making faces in back rooms. Spectacle's final invoice. By the time Carthage fell as a military rival, elephants had already shown their balance sheet truth. Strategic at first contact, then tactical liabilities once the other side learns. The premium eroded faster than the cost. That's a lesson bigger than antiquity. Every era has its elephant systems or technologies bought for their ability to stun. Over and over, reality asks the same question. When the stun fades, what remains? Discipline, logistics, a plan that doesn't require feeding 6 tons of symbolism a day. For Carthage, elephants were both a masterpiece and a mirror. The beast magnified Carthage's strength, maritime supply, daring, showmanship, and magnified its vulnerabilities, expensive maintenance, brittle dependence on fear, the temptation to confuse awe with advantage. Rome won, not because it never feared, but because it learned fast and remembered long. The last trumpet fades. An elephant breathes hard, ears fanning dust. Somewhere a mahout strokes a trunk and whispers the cue. Word that always worked in practice. The animal's eye is huge and wet and does not know about Senate votes, tax farms, or salvage write-offs. It knows forward, stop, left, right, water, and pain. Even spectacle is a creature in the end. Someone pays to feed it. Someone pays when it falls. If empires are loud when they take, they are quiet when they run. Nothing in this series has been quieter than the loaf and the mug, bread and ale, the twin motors of ordinary survival. They are also the place where Roman price tags ripple far past marble and sandals, past collapse, into centuries that called themselves medieval and still woke each day to the same math. What do we eat? What do we drink? And what do these answers do to us? Bread first. In Rome, grain is politics. Ships bring wheat from provinces. Granaries become the state's heartbeat. Doles unknowns stabilize a city where too many mouths clustered near too little soil. The enslaved sow reap, grind, bake, freed people broker. Citizens stand in lines and measure grievance in slices. Bread is not only food, it is contract. Taxes convert to grain, grain to loaves, loaves to peace. The moral ledger of slavery hides in every crumb. A polished Roman dinner begins with bread someone else needed until her wrists ached. A morning street breakfast, olives rests on nights someone else spent coaxing a kill. When senators argue about shipments, they argue as if grain were neutral. It isn't. It is soaked in time someone could not choose. Fast forward centuries, and the script persists. In medieval towns, bread shifts from wheat to rye and barley for the poordark. Dense sour while the elite hold thin slices of white. Like badges, the miller becomes gatekeeper. The oven becomes communal. Fees pile on dough. Grind toll, bake toll, tithe. Famine years teach children that bread can taste like chestnut and bark. Stability years teach them that bread is the shape of relief. In monasteries, bread is theology host at Mass. Body indoctrinated, logistics loves, stacked for brothers and pilgrims alike. The technology changes. The dependency does not. You can chart cultures by their crumb.ale with it. In Rome, wine stole poetry's column inches, but beer and ale, especially in provinces, were part of the day. In medieval Europe, ale becomes the standard drink, low alcohol, safer than water, brewed in kitchens and monasteries and sold in houses marked with brooms or branches. Children drink small ale, not as rebellion but as plumbing boil, ferment, survive. Women, our wives, run household breweries, sell surplus, and keep neighborhoods knitted together by mugs and rumor and practical credit. I owe you to pitchers after harvest. In abbeys, monks scale the art, clean wells, routine, strong and small ales for feast days and fasting days. An economy hums on bubbles. Bread and ale together answer the body's daily questions. They also answer a ruler's. How do we keep this? Many people standing up. Roman solutions, grain fleets, price edicts, tax incentives become medieval ones. Milling rights, market days, parish networks. The empire falls, but the administrative imagination around food stays alive in chancery. Latin and city bylaws. When people riot in the 14th century, they riot over bread first, then everything else. When kings fear cities, they don't just send soldiers, they send grain. The through line. Labor you don't see. Our 12 parts tracked sticker prices on bodies. Bread and ale remind us how value hides in routine. A weaver's day measured in arm lengths, a baker's day measured in proof and heat, a brewer's day measured in vats and patience, a nurse's day measured in breaths. How much did Roman slaves cost? Is the sharp question that opened the door. Bread and ale answer. It softly, more than the coins said. The true cost echoes in hands and spines and nights. That echo lasts longer than law. Continuities that should unsettle us. Rome's habit of turning people into inputs taught later powers bold lessons. When medieval lords bundle milling rights, oven rights, and pasture rights into a monopoly on survival, they are doing Roman math without using Roman coins. When a city posts a schedule of bread, weights and prices and fines bakers who cheat, it is the aediles edict with a crucifix on the wall. When a duke endows a monastery's brewery to supply his garrison and his poor, it is a cleaner version of the same truth. Control staples, control crowds. Even modern phrases carry the sediment. Breadwinner, our daily bread, breaking bread, on the breadline, earning your keep. The language remembers what the ledger recorded, that food is the first economy and the last politics. The names change. The leverage, DOESN, single quotes, T, afterlives, dash people, not systems. Follow a freedman in Rome who learned numbers in a kitchen, then opens a tiny street shop selling bread and cheap wine, still waking at dark. But waking on his terms, hiring 2 boys who call him Patronus with a grin. Follow a freedwoman who ran hair and wardrobe in a villa and now keeps a room, where women bring bread and gossip and coins and go home looking and feeling a little more held. Follow a medieval alewife who brews longer than her husband farms, whose ledgers in chalk matter more than his Tuesdays, who teaches her daughter when the foam tells the truth. These are afterlives carved out of earlier sentences. They don't excuse earlier chapters. They show what humans do with scraps of margin. Spin string into net, net into safety, safety into a little laughter at dusk. Not everyone gets that ladder. Enough do that we ought to notice. The moral receipt. Return to the forum. Hear the auctioneer hawk a good price. Remember our baseline, an unskilled laborer for something like 2 years of a soldier's base pay. Trained hands and minds for many times more. Beauty and spectacle at some stat by land. Then remember what those numbers bought, not just a person's output, but a world in which it felt normal to buy one. Bread and ale keep people docile when fairly priced and furious when not. Slavery used that rhythm fed the belly enough to get work, withheld enough to keep control, issued paper to keep lawsuits tidy, issued grain to keep streets content. What does that ask of us now? Not a tourist's shudder or a scholar's footnote, both have their place, but a citizen's reflex. Follow the price to the person. When you marvel at a thing, an overnight delivery, a perfect plate, a spotless lobby, ask who paid the unpriced part. How many wrists, backs, and nights are hidden under the sticker? Rome would want you to stop at the sticker. We've spent 12 parts refusing.